is Gilgeous-Alexander. McCollum staying with him. Spins, gets inside. Left-handed off the glass. Oh, what a sweet move.
Giddy, tough spot. Backdoor. What a pass. What a play. And J-Dub picks the pocket of Trae Young. He'll take it himself.
This is Lou Dort. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, and welcome to the Uncontested podcast, coming to you Wednesday, June 19th, 1 week out from the NBA draft. I'm your host for the evening, Jacob Niffen. We got a full squad tonight. I got JD with me.
Fellows.
Got Taylor.
Ready to go.
We got Nick Crane.
What to do? God,
but more importantly than those other three, special guest on the show, returning guest. I think this is year 3. Might have to get him on the payroll at this point. We've got everybody's favorite YouTube draft. I don't even know how to describe the draft videos. Like every guy who you want to know about in the draft, you go to YouTube, you search their name, and Keandre's videos come up. We got Keandre, Hoop Intellect on YouTube and Twitter. You guys already follow him, but if you don't already, if you're some sort of degenerate living under a rock, go follow Keandre. His YouTube breakdowns of these prospects over the years have just been phenomenal. This year, nothing less from him. It's been incredible. Keandre, thank you so much for joining the show tonight, man.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you guys having me on once again, 3 or 4 times, like you said. So it's been a while.
I think the first draft we had you on was probably the Josh Giddey year. They took Josh. Yeah. I don't think we had you on for the Poku draft. Thank God.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I remember us talking about James Bouknight because that was the big
I'm glad you remember that because I did not.
Thank goodness the Thunder did not go that route.
Yeah.
Hey, we had some fire shirts ready for that night though. We had Shay and Night instead of Day and Night shirts. That we cooked up. They were going to be awesome. Anyways, we're brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network and the best fast casual food in OKC, Dave's Hot Chicken and Spark OKC. Also, make sure 1 week from tonight, you join us on draft night as we do our annual draft live stream. We'll be on here for like 4 hours straight, hanging out throughout the entire first round Wednesday night, reacting to every pick, trade, and what the OKC Thunder do. So if you are not at a watch party, hell, if you are at a watch party, turn to YouTube. Listen to us. Come hang out for a bit. It's going to be a blast. It's always fun. We're going to do some giveaways that night. We'll see if the Thunder stay put at 12. Maybe we'll pick Keandre's brain on that spot at 12 here in a moment. But it's going to be a blast. So mark your calendars. Plan to have the draft up on your TV and us up on your computer screen on the YouTube live show. With all that being said, let's dive into some draft talk. 7 days out, Keandre. 7 days, almost exactly from now, we will know the Thunder pick. But, Keandre, as we are coming down the stretch here, 1 week out, big boards have shifted. They've changed. Mock drafts have gone up and up again and then up a third time. 1 week out, where are you sitting with your big board? Who are the guys that are rising? Who are the guys that are falling? And just how are you feeling now that we're 7 days out from the draft?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Most of the way set in stone, I would say. There's a couple people who are, towards the top that I feel like are in sort of a fairly big tier that I'm trying to figure out what I want to, value in certain prospects and then just kind of weighing strengths and weaknesses between in like a sort of vacuum way, because obviously every single team is going to have different value points, like especially in the top 5. So just kind of trying to weigh that with who I think is going to end up being the best players in the class. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I don't know that if there's anybody necessarily rising a ton. I think that would probably be towards more in like the 20s area where, there's a little bit more like, I wouldn't say volatile movement, but at least guys that I feel like I should value based off of you know, a philosophy more than I have at this point. But yeah, I think you know, the usual suspects are kind of still there.
I know they're out of the lottery. There's some guys that are more raw in this class, like a Risacher. Who are some guys though in the lottery that you think could come in and make an impact early on? Just a few of your favorite names in that archetype.
Maybe not Thunder. I think JD not Thunder related.
Yeah, just in general.
Just in general.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think somebody like Donovan Clingan is one of those guys who, even though while he is like a fairly young prospect, has one of the better chances of coming in and impacting, and has a role that we know he's going to probably be able to play in the NBA, and that's why he's getting a lot of noise as high as the number one pick, because he's more of a known commodity. We've seen guys over the last several years with similar advanced stats and defensive profiles as him come in and make a huge impact. You've got a guy like Derek Lively doing what he did as a rookie. And obviously there are two different athletes and different size players. And I think there's a distinction in certain things between them in terms of like catch radius and lob threat and those types of things. But in terms of just being a big body, a drop big, somebody who has at least some mobility at his size, that's a guy that I see wherever he gets picked, hopefully in like one of those good spots for him, like a potentially Memphis or, I think that he's going to be able to come in and make an impact, fairly early, wherever he ends up. And then I think beyond that, I would say probably Reed Shepherd. I think that there's like some reason for some hesitation in like his overall ceiling offensively, just based off of the creation and how much he's going to be capable of and in that way. But you just look at him as an overall player. He just comes in, he impacts the game, he's productive, high level shooter, one of the best in the class, heady playmaker, makes the extra pass, great transition passer. Like he just has so many pieces that I would imagine wherever he's at, even with some of the size concerns or stuff that he showed at the point of attack that maybe wasn't great, I think he's just going to be able to come in and make an impact in a way that maybe some of the other rookies drafted around him may not be able to as well.
Got a draft philosophy question on the heels of that. Like, you look at the 22 and 23 draft, you had really, really good bigs, like at the top. But generally, there's a lot of space in between, like the second big taken and the third big taken. Like Lively was late lottery, and then you had some guys kind of like late in the first. Year before that, you had Chet, you had Mark Williams, Jalen Duren. His year was kind of that middle lottery, late lottery, and then you had like a Walker Kessler late in the first round. Mm-hmm. This year, it feels like two bigs, maybe three probably taken in the lottery. And then you've got like four more with first round potential. Do you view that as a function of the league shifting, or is it an overreaction to seeing someone like Derek Lively have success as a rookie and more holistically, like rookie bigs and young bigs generally find it easier to carve out a role than like a guard in the league? Like how do you view that shift? Or is that just this class is big heavy?
Yeah, I think part of it is bigs in general have just a safer floor than, even as dynamic as somebody as Rob Dillingham or as the upside of a guy like Isaiah Collier. You've still got guys like Yves Missi and obviously Zach Edey, the guys that we've, kind of talked about, Clingan, we know what role they'll fill in the NBA. So I think it's more of a product of I actually do like the bigs in this class. I think that in any year they would be at least have first round, potential. Those guys are kind of in the 20s right now, but I think it is a function of just knowing more of what we're going to get from them in a way that some of the players in the rest of this class it isn't there in the same way. So I would say the Lively thing and just kind of as a potential overreaction, I'm not sure that they're just like too much related. I would think it would just be more of like, what they're going to bring to the table. And there's a sort of safeness to whatever their floor is in relation to like some of the other guys or positions that are out there.
So Keandre, you dropped your big board 6.0. We talked about that here at the top of the podcast. And I know that you said in your video, and you've alluded here as well, that it's not necessarily your last one. I think you're going to drop one more before the draft next week. But one thing I really enjoyed about your big board is there's definitely some differences from the quote unquote consensus. You have some players higher, some players lower. For example, some of the ones that stand out to me, and I really like these, but like Ron Holland at 2 feels pretty high. Rob Dillingham at 3 feels high to me. Risacher all the way down to 5. You also have like T. John Saloon there later outside the lottery. Even guys like Bub Carrington and Jalen Tyson up there that I really like also. So not to ask you about any of those guys specifically, but maybe some of those guys that I touched on, why do you have them higher than consensus? Some of these other players lower than consensus. Some of those names that really kind of stood out to you that you really like or maybe don't like as much as a quote unquote consensus.
Yeah, so I think starting with we'll start with like Ron Holland. I just tend to buy some of his production from this season, his athletic tools, his rate of improvement year over year, just being a completely different player than we saw in high school as more of an interior oriented kind of 4-man. I wasn't really a big fan of his coming into the year. I thought that there was, too many questions and, just even being able to get to the basket consistently and having the handle to do those types of things. He showed that this year. And obviously the Ignite has this kind of cloud over it at this point, and obviously is disbanded now. But I think, and they were obviously terrible too. But I think that just being able to do that against professional level competition, and not obviously he didn't shoot well at all, but just having some of the rate of improvement and the confidence to be able to do certain things and operating as a primary initiator on a team that just didn't have anybody who could set the table or make plays better than he could, which is going to be a problem for anybody. I think that he performed well, and I would, towards the top of the draft, I would rather take a swing on a guy like that who I would feel like, I know if he can just get it to league average or just respectable from 3, we've got somebody who has the potential to outpace a lot of those other options who maybe already do shoot but do the other things worse. I like his motor. I think his defensive playmaking stood out in a big way, and I think his versatility is something that is something that a lot of teams could use in a lot of different ways. So that's the reason that I have Ron Holland more towards the top 5, and he'll probably he'll stay there for me. And then there's some other guys that we can get into, but.
And sorry, we don't have to go like player by player from the ones I mentioned, but maybe just like why you have those archetypes of players higher than others. And then somebody like Ed T. John Saloon lower than maybe, as like I said, some of the other mock drafts or big boards that we see.
Yeah. So I want to touch on Rob Dillingham for a second because, he's high. I think my thing with him, and he'll probably end up just a little bit lower than where he was, only because while I do think that he is the best creation bet in this class, I'm not sure, obviously there's a team building issues that could arise, with a small guard, even if he is, like, let's just say that he becomes Trae Young level player. Like there's still, issues in surrounding or building a team around a player like that. And I think just in the scope of like looking at past classes, future classes, building with somebody like that in mind, it is a little bit more risky than having somebody that high on the board. So you probably fall just a little bit for me. But I think just in general, having Ron Holland, I value the creation ability and being able to make plays happen, and also those guys I feel like are able to be malleable and make plays within the flow offense. I think Rob Dillingham's off-ball play is one of the more underrated elements of any prospect in this class. So those types of things. And then for specifically Salon, I just think he's like super raw in a lot of ways that I'm not sure I would consider as high as like 9, 8 as he's been kind of trending more towards. I just think there's so many pieces there, and everybody always compares him to Usman Jang. I think that's mostly because they're French, but just from like a raw prospect perspective, I think Zhang had more to fall back on in a lot of ways and showed more that was tangible. And obviously he's taken, a little bit more time. So that would just be the main thing. I don't think that he's necessarily like super far in terms of like the other prospects and just being incapable of being a lottery pick. I think that, even OKC considering him as one of their guys is still like in the realm of possibilities. But I just tend to be a little lower on those guys who just take so long to figure out and find a niche that, you can kind of get tossed in the cycle of the G League and not, being able to get those real on-court reps in the NBA.
Yeah, G League follow-up there. Ignite, like you said, disbanded. Had a lot of talent. Like my question is going to be about progression for guys and like where they are now versus start of the season. Like I think, like for me, Thierry Darlin, super interesting. Ethan Almanza was an incredible FIBA player. Like those guys aren't even in this draft at this point. But the three, Dink, oh yeah, but like next year he'll be phenomenal. But the three guys that are kind of the first round grades right now, and Buzelis and Holland and Tyler Smith, where were they to start this season for you, and where are they today? Like, I don't need like numbers, but would you consider them like stock up or stock down in the G League?
Yeah, so I would say Ron Holland and Modest Buzelis are mostly in the same area. I had them both as, a little bit stronger contenders to be top 5 at that point. But, I would say they're generally in the same area, top 10. So their stock wasn't necessarily hit too much, in my opinion. Obviously, Ron Holland has dipped a little bit further, so he's taken, the biggest dip out of those guys. And then Tyler Smith has just kind of, ascended in a way that I don't think a lot of people were expecting because, you've got a guy who, was a highly touted high school prospect at one point, goes to overtime elite, kind of just floats around for a couple years, and you see some flashes here and there, but nothing really too tangible in terms of NBA prospects. And then he's able to show what he does, and I thought that he was as consistent as anybody on that team from start to finish. So he's a guy who improved. I think really just the G League as a whole, not even Ignite. I think there is something that the NBA is going to have. It's like we're at an inflection point to an extent where they're going to have to, pour a little bit more resources into some prospects on even individual teams, just having, better environments and more focus on that. I think adding that third round in the NBA draft is going to eventually, be able to, that's the next step to be able to do that. And then, obviously from there, just having a better environment for basketball, making it a little bit more game-like and being able to actually develop over years of time, and having a structured team where guys aren't leaving and coming and going. And, you're just looking for this guy, let's say this guy goes down. Now he's getting all the shots because he's the 7th pick, like there's just so much going on that I think in a lot of ways it doesn't lend itself to that. And then also you don't have an environment at all in terms of like crowd or anything like that, and competitiveness and playing for actual stakes. That's just not really there in the way that it is in some lower level leagues overseas. So yeah, I think, G League as a whole, is just in kind of a weird spot. But for the Ignite, besides Almanza, Darlin, I don't think it hurt them necessarily as bad as it could have been when you win, 4 games or whatever.
Totally. Yeah, I think if the NBA wants to have a program, they can't stick all the good prospects on one team. They have to go like NBL Next Stars, where like you're 1 or 2 guys on a team. I know Jacob has a question, but quick follow up to that. Am I crazy to think that Ron Holland, Buzelis, both kind of floating general consensus where you had them to start the year, and Tyler Smith rising in that chaotic of a system is almost like a props to them and like a thumbs up, right? Like that should almost be like a selling point. Like, look, in this chaotic system, these guys maintained expectations from what I had to start the season.
Yeah, that's part of the reason that they kind of have stayed high, just being able to figure it out over the course of the season in a way that, it could have gone a completely different direction. I think, obviously there is some criticism, some fair criticisms between both of them that were there from what they showed. But at the same time, being able to make things happen and avoid completely going off the other way is a positive for them. And I think, carrying the load of a team like that in a way is definitely a positive.
I love it. Keandre, the last draft pod we did, we played a game where we essentially played matchmaker with some of these prospects and tried to find their most realistic match, their dream match, and their nightmare match. We're not going to go that deep with you because I have another game for you later on. Instead, though, I want you to choose a few teams. Obviously, the Thunder need to be one of them. You can choose, let's say 5 teams. Let's go for 5. And tell us who is the dream pairing for them with a player in this draft. Let's try to keep it kind of close to their draft range, maybe plus or minus 3 or 4 picks, right? So if we do the Thunder at 12, you could go up to 8 or 9 and down to 15. But some of these dream matches between a player and a team in this draft. Do you have any that jump to mind?
Yeah, I think I mentioned one earlier already. So I think the first one would be Donovan Clingan in the Memphis Grizzlies. I think just having a 5 like him, obviously you see what a guy like Steven Adams did just as a screener and, defensive rebounder, helping out Jaren Jackson in that front court. I think that he would be perfect there. Now, his range has kind of, risen over time, and they're kind of exploring, trade options, as, reports have been saying, to potentially get him. But I think that would be one of the first ones, on my list.
Keandre, so obviously you do all these deep breakdowns. You dive into the film, and then you make your own videos and post them up on YouTube, kind of summaries for those of us who don't have access to the synergies or whatever it may be. So after doing so, Nick already kind of asked you specifically about the G League Ignite players, but heading into the season or even just throughout the season, you're watching these guys. Who of those prospects maybe are you higher on and lower on after doing some film breakdowns on these guys?
From the beginning of the year, or
it doesn't have to be, just whenever you did some of your video breakdowns and kind of dove into the film, who rose in your opinion and kind of changed your opinion on them for better or worse?
Yeah. I think so. Part of it is just being able to watch them over the year. They kind of just gradually change, and you kind of look back and see certain things that, in your opinions, that changed over time. But I think watching closely, one guy who I became just a little bit lower, well, actually higher on, was probably Clingan. Just seeing his mobility and just all at the same time, and just watching his season as a whole after the national championship run, I bought him a little bit more, even with some of the offensive concerns and his touch and certain things like that, and just not being a true post-up threat or interior force like that. And then I would say Devin Carter is another one that recently, just watching all his stuff at one time, just buying his energy, his motor, his defensive abilities, both on and off the ball, and also the improvement that he made offensively, as a shooter and just an overall ball handler and creator. That was one that, being able to really sit down and watch everything that he had, where, he stood out a little bit more, even as an older prospect and somebody who, isn't necessarily a traditional point guard. So those two, I would say. And then this one is actually about to come out soon, so I'll say that. But Tristan da Silva is another one I'm a little bit lower on after just, recently reconsidering some things. Not necessarily as completely changed my opinion on who he is as a player, but just some concerns in his foot speed defensively, being able to, defend at the point of attack and handle wings and screen navigation, those types of things. And then also Just him being an older player and looking at some of his, statistical profile, the defensive rebounding percentage and stocks and things like that. So not necessarily somebody who I think too much differently about, but in terms of a guy who you would say is like the second upperclassman taken behind Connect, I don't necessarily think that I would go in that direction. So, yeah.
Interesting. What the dog doing? Let's take our first break. Let's take our first break of the night. On the other side, we will give our sparks, and we're going to play a game of Take It or Leave It with Keandre. Stick around. We will be right back. We are back. JD, tell us about some Spark.
Yes, Spark Joy at Oklahoma's family-friendly joint Spark, located in Citratail Park, recently opened in Chisholm Creek and Nichols Hills as of just a couple days ago. Dive into their menu of burgers, bites, and cold delights. Don't skip the must-try BLC burger, pink fries, frozen peach club special, and rotating custard flavor of the month. Can't forget to mention their newest menu item, Rumble Fries. This tray of loaded fries are perfect to share for the whole table, named after none other than Rumble the Bison himself.
Love it. So our spark of the week this week, I have a question for you guys to kind of trigger our spark. It is, what player currently in the OKC Thunder's draft range, so maybe a few ahead or a few behind, we're talking like 10 to 14 range, could the Thunder take that would spark the fan base into disappointment on draft night?
Disclaimer:
so who's the guy
you can't
that they
take Cody
could take?
Williams because that's a BS answer. So don't even try.
So this would spark them to disappointment. Maybe it would spark some fans to go outside and burn some things, use some profanities towards their television. Who do you guys got?
I'll go first. I think I'm incredibly high on Ron Holland. Like, I would take him 2 or 3 pretty easy. I think based on what reports are saying that he'll slide a bit. I think that in every draft, there's that, like, MPJ was the guy in his draft, or like the more he slid, every team was like, oh, gonna get this guy as a steal. I think Ron will slide a little bit. And like
Cam Whitmore was that guy last year, right?
Totally. I think Ron will slip. I don't think he'll slip close to 12. I think he may slip to like 10. Close enough that Thunder fans are going to say like, oh my gosh, Sam Presti's going to get the steal, and then he's going to get taken, and then it's going to be like rip your heart out kind of thing. So that's my it's probably not an answer today. Like, Thunder fans probably don't care about Ron today, but when he slips on draft night, I think Thunder fans will get this false sense of he's a Thunder for like a brief 20-minute span.
That's a great one.
I think I'm going to go an answer that we've discussed on here before, a guy that's brought up in our comment section quite often. It's Zach Edey. I think if the Thunder draft is Zach Edey, I might just fall to my knees on our live stream. No disrespect to Zach Edey, of course, but he's just not the. If you watch the Thunder, he's not the archetype of center of the day.
So you think Thunder fans would be sad if he was drafted before 12?
I think some Thunder fans would.
Okay.
Oh, I think JD and I are going off of Thunder fans would be disappointed if they took him.
Yes.
Oh, I thought your question was be disappointed if he was taken before.
Oh,
That's
no,
how I took it too.
Sorry.
So that's why
Nick
Nick said
I
Cody
love
Williams.
Nick's answer because I thought Nick was kind of riffing there. But it was like, who would they be disappointed if they took?
Oh,
okay.
what? Oh,
Yeah,
no,
see,
no.
I took it
to be
the way-
clear, Ron Holland was like disappointed that they didn't get to take him. I think
Yeah,
if they got Ron
I got
Holland,
that. I think that's
if they got
how I
Ron
did it.
Holland, I'd be saying some pretty absurd things. Like, I know he didn't shoot, but holy cow, can you imagine Chet, J-Dub, Lou Dort, Kason Wallace, and Ron Holland? Like, you're not scoring, bro.
That's an elite defense.
Yeah.
So JD's answer is Zach Edey.
Yeah, it's Zach Edey. Yeah. No thanks.
Before someone steals Keandre, you want to get on this? Who is somebody that the Thunder could take that you think their fans would be disappointed in?
That was mine. I was going to say Zach Edey.
Damn it, JD!
I don't know that they're necessarily. I feel like some fans have this like idea that the Thunder like really need this giant center because Chet is too small or whatever. And I don't know that they would necessarily be some fans would be like upset, but I definitely would be. I think it would be confusing just based off of how they built the team to this point. I think a different one would just be like Nikola Topic or something, like just somebody who probably is never really gonna like be able to do much. And then obviously the Giddey situation of the last several years and some parallels between them. And I guess in a way, just needing the ball and not being shooters at this point. But yeah,
that's a good answer because a lot of fans I think want an impact player at 12, and he's out.
Yeah,
good answer.
Yeah. With Jacob's actual question, I think the easy answer is Rob Dillingham, because the average Thunder fan is going to say short ball hog who just chucks shots, and that's like a sliver of his game at times, but like he's much more than that. But I think that the casual Thunder fan would freak the hell out if Dillingham was the pick at 12.
Yeah,
a guy that in Nick's game on Sunday, which by the way, I rewatched the Sunday stream. My camera looked insane.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people knew what was happening. Well, I was on the ground breaking up a dog fight and got my ass bit. Not my actual ass, but it was my arm. So I spent Monday morning getting a tetanus shot and antibiotics because this dog bit the shit out of me. She's lucky I didn't bite her back.
My God.
I'm so sad I couldn't play the "What the Dog Doing" sounded while that was happening.
That would have been foul.
We didn't know it was a dog thing at the time. He just like his head went below his desk for like 30 seconds. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yep, I was getting bit. That's what was going on.
Yeah.
It wasn't funny at all. Anyways, a guy that you guys were talking about at that time that I think maybe the casual fan would at first say like, what are they doing? They don't need another guard. They got too many small guys. Go get a big. But a guy that I would actually like be really in on is Jared McCain.
I like that.
I just, especially like, I don't know. What if Isaiah Joe was part of a bigger move this summer to go get your big wing, and McCain is kind of your cheap Isaiah Joe replacement? I just find that kind of interesting. He and Kaysen off the bench would be a lot of fun, I think. But I think general fan, like very casual fans would say, they should have got Zach Edey. They need the big guy, and would have got, they calling him the sports animal, calling them Yardbirds or whatever. But that's the one I'm going with. Taylor, have you gone?
I have not. Full disclaimer, I was the one who put this in the doc, and I intend it to be how Nick took it, where a player who... And so Saloon was kind of my guy there. I think so many fans just get married to the mock drafts, and they think, oh, well, he's been mocked to OKC for so long. Oh, he just went 2 picks ahead. I can't believe the Thunder didn't trade up and get him. But if it were a player that Thunder fans would be disappointed in, quote unquote, I've said that a lot on this podcast, I just realized. But if they were to pick a player at 12,
yeah, that's your thing, dude.
It is.
Give us the
that's
flip.
my in a vacuum.
Give us the flip. Who would they freak out about drafting, or who would you freak out about drafting in a bad way? Who do you not want? Who do you not want?
Like a Zach Edey. You guys already mentioned it. But one I have in mind that I actually wouldn't mind necessarily, but I think a lot of fans might be a little disappointed in, is Keyshawn George. There's been a little bit of smoke there, I think, between him and the Thunder, but he is another jumbo guard forward, can really shoot when he's stationary, especially catch and shoot. Doesn't move well off ball and doesn't shoot super well off ball. He's a really solid defender, especially for his age, which is kind of surprising because he lacks so much athleticism. But he kind of reminds me a little bit more of that Ousmane Dieng mold that Keandre mentioned earlier. So I think when Thunder fans kind of dove more into him, they'd be a little disappointed because he's more of a project. But at the same time, I think he's a player who could really contribute and fit well for this Thunder team if all things go well. So that Keyshawn George would be my answer.
Nice. I'm on record now. I would not hate Zach Edey in Oklahoma City for a lot of reasons. Like I don't think
I would hate you in Oklahoma City.
I don't think he's the perfect fit, but like this team could completely whiff this draft and it's not going to matter. And
it's true.
1 year, 5 years, 10 years, get weird. Like if Zach Edey ends up like it would not, it's like not outside the realm possibility that Zach Edey ends up being like a phenomenal player in the league. And you're like, wow, how do we not see this 2-time college player of the year that averaged 25 and 12 Now he's averaging 18 and 9 in the league, and he can shoot 3. Like, there's just a world where it's like, well, duh, why didn't somebody take him at 12?
Yeah, there's a world that's also like Taco Fall.
Yeah, but, I mean, there's also a world where every player we've talked about in this podcast could be out of the league in 3. That's the draft.
Yep.
You know,
Why not
get weird?
All right.
Why not get weird?
We could go down a deep rabbit hole here. I'm trying to hold my tongue. Let's move on. Keandre, we have a game we play on this podcast called Take It or Leave It. It's a super simple game. We are going to give you a statement, and you are simply going to choose if you are taking that statement, meaning you believe it, or are you leaving it, meaning you think it's BS. You don't believe it. And then give us a little bit of reasoning behind your answer. Okay, I'll kick us off here with one of my favorite ones. Take it or leave it. More than 2 top 10 picks get traded on draft night. For reference, last season, we technically had 3 top 10 picks get traded. Dallas's number 10 went to Oklahoma City. And was it 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 that got flip-flopped between the Wizards and the Pacers? That would be the Jarris Walker, Bilal Coulibaly flop. So technically there was 3 firsts moved on draft night last year. This take it or leave it is at least 2 get moved this year.
I would probably say, I'm going to say, you said that take it is more than 2?
Well, yeah. So if you take it, you think 2 or more will happen. If you leave it, you think less than 2 will happen.
Okay. I'm going to say leave it just because it is hard to find trade partners, especially that high. I think there's a possibility that somebody moves with Houston. Obviously Memphis looking to move, San Antonio having their thing going on. But I feel like a lot of it is just posturing, and most of it is going to stay the same. So maybe there's a trade between a couple teams, but I would leave it, just staying on the safe side.
I like it. You guys can ask the next one.
Okay, this one's fun, and I think I saw ESPN's mock draft today, and this was true. So curious what you think, Keandre. Donovan Clingan, take it or leave it, will be selected in the top 3 of this draft.
Yeah, I would take that. I think that he's trending that way, and then kind of like I said before, I just think like his people just know what he is as a commodity. So, and a lot of those teams towards the top, could use a big at the least.
I'll go next. When you think about, I guess, the Wizards when they're drafting at 2, will Alex Sarr be on the board for them as a possibility? I think it's a no-brainer they'd take him, but is he going to be there for them?
I would say leave it then, so he's not going to be there. I think the Hawks are going to end up picking him. I know there's been all the talk about them not being able to get a workout with him and things like that, but I kind of just see him being the first pick. I don't know. And then, Risacher or whoever else they've been kind of linked to going number 2 or possibly Clingan going there. So, yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into a Thunder one. Keandre, take it or leave it. The Thunder select a player at their current pick number 12.
That is a tough one. I think I'm gonna say take it, and I'm gonna say because I think they have confidence that they can find somebody who is eventually going to contribute and be a cheap contract, as they're obviously the 1 seed and moving towards contention. Obviously, if there's a deal out there that ends up, popping up, I think that they're going to explore that, be able to get somebody who can really impact right away. But even if it's Salon and he ends up spending a couple years in the G League or, back end rotation, I think like that's like an underrated piece of like team building. If you're able to get somebody who maybe isn't great until that third or fourth year as they get into that second contract, that extension, that becomes a bargain because you get a player who is maybe a little bit better than what they've earned at this point. So, I'll say that they keep it.
Love it. Keandre, take it or leave it. Somebody outside of like the consensus, let's say like top 7 or 8, goes top 5 on draft night.
I would leave that. I think that for some reason, I just feel like they're going to pick between that like group of players. Like there's not like if Devin Carter went top 5, I would be pretty surprised. Or
I think that's a pretty clear tier, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I think that group is pretty much set in stone in a way that, like, honestly, even previous classes had more of a chance of like Jarris Walker going up a little bit or somebody else, Anthony Black. But yeah.
Here, take it or leave it. Zach Edey is the third, I guess first, second, or third or better big taken in this class. Basically saying after Sarr and Clingan is he the next big taken.
Yeah. Yeah, I would take that. I think that he's got the best chance. Just, given his size and, production, touch around the rim. Obviously, it's going to take a spot where he's able to do certain things, but I think if he molds his game to the NBA level, he could be like a real mismatch. I just think, obviously like a spot like OKC, somebody like Chet as your building block throws it off a little bit. But yeah, I think that he would probably have the best chance. So yeah, I'll go with him.
Okay.
All right, another one for you. The Thunder do not draft a big man in the draft.
I would take that. I think the odds are decently high. I think like the possibility they explore that in free agency, obviously with like there's several names out there, is fairly high too. So I would take that.
So last one, unless one of the other guys have one that pops up. The Spurs are very interesting to me, Keandre, because they're picking up both 4 and 8. They have a ton of options. They've been linked to a couple different rumors in regards to trades. So my take it or leave it for you. The Spurs select at both of 4 and 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they will. So I'll take that. I think that they'll end up making those picks. Because it kind of makes sense unless they're doing some kind of deal for DeJounte or Trey. I think keeping both of those picks just based on the timeline just makes more sense. Unless they feel like we can go get Sarr and they want to pair those two in the front court. That would be the only scenario where I think it would make sense. Yeah, like if they traded 4 and 8 for Risacher, I'm not sure that I would really enjoy that or think that that's what they're gonna end up doing. But yeah, that would be the scenario.
Love it. Let's take let's take our next break of the night. On the other side, we will get more Thunder specific with Keandre as we approach draft night and kind of figure out what OKC is going to do. We will be right back. And we are back. All right, Keandre, we've kind of talked the draft as a whole, some of your philosophy. We've talked a lot of stuff at the top with the take it and leave it stuff. Let's get Thunder specific. Pick number 12. In your opinion, as you've dug through this class, done your big boards, you have your tier breaks. Pick 12 where the Thunder are selecting at. Is that a good place in this draft to be selecting, or is that a place where you would not want to be making a pick in this draft?
I think it's a pretty good place. I think there's obviously that first kind of tier of players, but there's a chance that there's some decent value, like a Ron Holland, that ends up falling that to that area, or somebody falls to 10, Utah, and that kind of general range. So I like that part of the draft. I think there's going to be a decent amount of value for the Thunder specifically. I guess it depends on positionally who's available, right? Like if it's if Rob Dillingham is there, and then you just got like other guards like Carrington or whoever else, maybe that's not the most attractive to them as a team, but I think it's a good spot.
Another question for you. What specific players do you think are in that range that would fit OKC's needs and specifically could play next season? Maybe a Salon may not if you think he's too raw. Who is someone that could come in and play immediately?
Yeah, I think somebody like Dalton Connect, if he was to be there, could immediately come in and contribute. Obviously, as a 6'6" sort of wing, broad shoulders, able to shoot the three ball as well as almost anybody in the class. Put together a big time season as a scorer, just making things happen as the clear number one option on that Tennessee team, carrying them on a lot of nights. I think that he's somebody who could really fit in and fill that role specifically. Now, it may take Isaiah Joe being moved or some pieces just to get him in the right spot, especially defensively. But you have the insulation of other guys like Kaysen and Lou Dort and Chet, obviously on the back end, to be able to bring him along. And I think at his size he'll be able to be passable eventually. So I think he's somebody who could come in and contribute. And obviously being a little bit older player, Devin Carter is another one. Again, another guard, kind of does similar things to Kaysen, but if you going in all in on defense, he's 6'3", but 6'8", 6'9" wingspan. Somebody who just really gets after it and can make plays in a couple of different ways. That's another guy who I could see, just coming in and making things happen. So yeah, those two at 12, and then possibly, someone like Deron Holmes would be another one as a big, somebody who is kind of in that tweener spot, 4 or 5, but has a lot of skills as an offensive player, someone who has stretched his game out over the last year and, is able to attack closeouts, score inside. Somebody I think could, get in the mix fairly early, especially a team that's been playing, Jay Will a lot of minutes over the last couple of years.
I like that you mentioned Devin Carter. I think that's a very popular name, especially in draft circles right now, and would be a ton of fun on this Thunder team. Like you said, it may result in another player currently on the roster needing to be traded, but I love his upside, as well as Bub Carrington and somebody else, Carlton Carrington, you mentioned earlier. Honestly, I've been a big fan of his ever since like early spring, watching him at UCLA heading into the tournament, and he's a very fun player that I could see carving out a role for this team.
Love it. So you have like this top 5 you feel pretty good about, like in some order, those guys are going in their own tier. If you got a call from Sam Presti tomorrow and he says, hey, we can't get in the top 5, but like we can move up to 6. We got the assets to do whatever we want to do. We can get into the top 6. No, we can get 6 to 11, I guess. Like not top 5, anything else we can get. Who's the guy outside of that top 5 group that you're like, dude, unload the picks? I'm not saying like you're going to trade 10 picks, but like give up some of your picks and go get this guy because he is the guy for Oklahoma City that you want to go get now.
That's a tough question because I don't know how many guys there are that I like giving up assets for, because there's such like a volatility in some of their stocks and how things could go. But I would say one of those guys who I would at least be interested in would be Modest Buzelis. I think that's kind of a bit of an under-discussed name when like talking about the Thunder, partially because like he's probably not going to fall that far. But I think the idea of somebody like him, obviously he doesn't shoot it well yet, but someone who could play the 4, provide some help side rim protection, was a little bit better on ball defensively or just, out in space than he's kind of given credit. has some upside as like a scorer and just being able to do certain things in different ways, play around creators. I think he's a guy who I would be like fine with them trading up to 7 or 8 or something, and making it happen.
Question off the exercise here. Buzelis, like coming into Ignite, was like known for being a 6'10" shooter. Shooting was his thing. Didn't do it well with Ignite. Do you still believe he will be a shooter at the NBA level?
I think that he's going to be passable. I don't know that he's going to be knocked down 40% type of guy. Yeah. But I like his mechanics enough. I think that he, there's nothing really going on that's too wrong. I would say that there's this is like a little bit of a tangent, but and making the adjustment to the NBA line, some guys who don't necessarily have the greatest energy transfer, don't dip a ton, like a Jabari Smith, have high release points. I think Grady Dick falls into this basket as well. It gets a lot tougher to make that adjustment than a one motion guy, shooting from that distance. So I would buy him, improving over the next couple of years.
Is there something also to going from high school basketball to the G League, which has the NBA 3-point line, versus going from high school to college to G League? Like, and maybe Nick can chime in on this as well, but like, how much of that do you think plays a role?
I think it plays a lot because that's a big distance. Like, there's a big gap between that, and just like shooting stationary shots, that's a huge jump. Even going from high school to college is a jump in an adjustment period. When guys show up on, it's not as much because some guys just shoot from further nowadays, but it is still an adjustment. So skipping that step, especially for somebody like Buzelis, who has had to work on his body pretty tirelessly over the last 2 years to, compete at certain levels. I think it was definitely a big adjustment. And you look in the past, you've got other guys who've struggled to make that and maybe get a little bit hotter, towards the end of the year. So yeah, I definitely say that's the thing.
Yeah, Jacob, for reference, high school to college is 1 inch. It's 19 3/4 to 20 3/4. NBA is 23 3/4. So you're talking like a 1 inch difference versus a 4 inch difference. Like, you're talking a guy that in high school looks like he's shooting Trae Young threes is shooting regular NBA threes. Like, it's very different.
Yeah. For reference, I one time shot on the Thunder court.
For reference.
And shot a 3-pointer.
Direct reference.
And as it released, I was like, oh, that's money. And I shot that bitch like 3 feet short.
Yeah.
It is a long ways to that rim.
Yeah, it is.
And I think there's like the flip side of that as well.
I've never jumped so high on a jump shot in my life, brother.
And it still went short.
I felt like I was shooting on that 20-foot rim at Summer League. That's what it felt like.
That was rough. That's how I felt too. I thought I nailed that and it was short. I think the flip side of that too.
Story of my life. Thinking I got it and it's just a little too short.
No context needed. I think the flip side of that is the defenders that you're going against as well. We have the athletes in the NBA, especially going from high school to the G League, for example, or another professional league. Like, as you have those kind of athletes who can defend and close out on such a higher level than what you're used to in high school, where you're essentially just getting your own shot whenever. I think that's why we see a lot of players struggle also.
Yeah.
Keandre, next. Oh, sorry, Taylor. Jinx. Do you have one?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Let's say that Nick just asked you about like trading up to 6 or 7 and who they could get. Let's go the reverse. Let's say they want to trade back. Looking at the board here, like I don't want to drop them all the way to the 20s. So let's say the Lakers are out of their ever-loving mind and want to get up to 12 to take Bronny. Okay, not happening. We're just having fun here. And the Thunder slide back to that 17, 18, 19 range. Who are some guys in that range that you like for OKC? And obviously, I think the tiers here are so wide that maybe someone that was going to be at 12 would be at like 17 or 18. But according to like your big board, who are some guys that you would like in that range if they slid back?
Yeah, I would say DeRon Holmes. I already mentioned him, so we don't have to, go over him again. But I think that he would be a possible trade back candidate, especially because, in a lot of places he's trended more towards like late first round. We'll see how true that ends up being on draft night. But that would be a guy. And then I would say I wouldn't mind like Keyshawn George, at that point. I do think that he obviously has certain athletic deficiencies, or, he's not able to get to the basket as well and finish and those types of things. But just looking at him as more of a wing shooter and guy who, did prove himself to be capable defensively, I think he's somebody who could make sense. And if you're trying to, take more of that swing and it's not as expensive a contract at that point in the draft, I think, I don't mind that either.
I like it. You guys have any more questions for Keandre? All right, the last one, Keandre. We're putting you on the spot. What did the Thunder do on draft night at 12? What's your official prediction?
I honestly, I've thought about this a lot, just like doing mock drafts and stuff, and in private. And even when I put out the last one, it was just like I sat there trying to think, what are they gonna do? And I don't think I've ever gotten it right. So, I wouldn't have guessed that they were picking Giddey at 6. I wouldn't have guessed that they were. The only thing I would have guessed was Ousmane Dieng. I was pretty sure that they were going to take him, and they ended up doing it. But I'm going to go. I'm going to go with Devin Carter. I just, for some reason, I feel like he's going to be the pick. But
that gets me excited.
I'd be screaming. That'd be sick.
Yeah. I like it.
That'd be sick.
Incredible.
He is so
Hey,
badass.
I do have one more question, Keandre.
Mm-hmm.
Is the question who's better between OSU and OU? Because Keandre
No.
understands.
That's
the vibe
Nick's
here.
question. Yeah, no, I mean, kind of related. Keandre, how do you feel about our Kansas City Chiefs offseason? Got Hollywood Brown in, got Xavier Worthy in the draft. They addressed some more defensive needs in the draft. How are you feeling about the Chiefs outside of the obviously the off-field stuff that's happened?
Off-field stuff aside, I think that they could sign me. I go out there, catch a couple passes, run a couple routes. We'd be good to go at this point. So, I doubted them last year the whole time. I was like, MVS might be the worst player on the planet, and shows up big time when we needed it. So at this point, I'm just like, it's whatever. Hardman, I couldn't stand him. I still, he's got some leeway for a while, but whatever happens, I think we've always got a shot because we got 15 and Andy Reid. So
we do have a few questions from the stream, JD. They are starred. Do you want to go through those with Keandre real quick?
Yes. We'll start with the super chat. We got that a little bit earlier. From CRBN or maybe Carbon 27, whichever you prefer. I don't know. What do you guys think of Cody Williams and how he would fit into the Thunder if it happened?
Yeah, I think, he's another guy who's probably a little further away than some people have, described him as, just being a skinnier wing, 174 pounds at the combine. Somebody who had a couple injuries this year, but didn't all the way, I would say, just completely prove himself in the way that he might have liked to. But I think long-term for the Thunder, as long as you are confident in his jumper, coming to fruition, and I'm a little bit more hesitant on that, then he probably, be a fine pick as a versatile wing defender and somebody who can, just make a play, attack, close out, get out the way, cut, that type of guy. But yeah, I think he'd be fine, but not necessarily my first choice.
Cool. Next one from Matt Noonan. Could Ousmane Dieng make a similar leap in year 2 to 3 as Jalen Johnson, who went from 5.6 points per game to 16 points per game? He says, I could see Us averaging 10 or more if he gets more aggressive.
That's a big jump. I don't think the opportunity is necessarily.
Yeah.
The opportunity isn't there in the same way, and Jalen Johnson is just a little more naturally physical, aggressive than Ouz has been to this point. I mean, maybe he kind of makes that jump, and that's what propels him to be there. But that would be a big time, thing to happen for the Thunder.
Feels like
I think the only way Ouz averages 10 a game is if there's a bus crash and the guys can't play for like 2 months.
feels like Jalen Johnson is very
Awesome.
self-confident. Dude, like quit Duke. Like if he hadn't done that, he may have gone in the lottery. Like there were all the questions around him were not about what he does on the court. It was like, is this guy like basketball? Is he going to be coachable? I think it's just a very different kind of player. Like Ouz, like it would be a win this year if the guy stepped on the floor and decided he wanted to like attack versus like just stand there. Like it's Matt Noonan that like Keandre said, that would be a significant boost for the Thunder. I think it'd be an unexpected boost and not something that the team is banking on happening.
Yeah. All right, next one from our guy Smoot. Question for Keandre. I've seen Zach Edey mock to the Thunder, even though he doesn't fit the play style. So I'm curious what things you consider when mocking players to teams.
Yeah, so I think it's like a mixture of who I believe to be the best players available on my personal board, and also who would make the most sense in this situation, who would have the most success or best chance of having success in a situation. That's kind of my approach. I know some of these other, bigger mainstream mocks are trying to take in Intel, and they also will at times just slide in a player that they feel like belongs there just based off of their personal board or thought of the class as a whole. So I think that some of that happens with the Thunder sometimes. But yeah, that's I just like to mix in mostly who I think is the best players available, and then, does it make sense in this situation too?
Sick. And last one from Matt. Should OKC be drafting for a future starter or a 6th to 7th man? Is it a waste to draft for a bench player at 12? And lastly, should the plan be to draft Josh's replacement?
I think the strategy a lot of times in the late lottery is just getting the contributor in a lot of ways. Now, certain classes are different than others, and this one is definitely one that's even more of a point of emphasis, just trying to get somebody who can come in and make a contribution. So that would be what I would be looking for if I'm OKC. And I don't think that necessarily the plan is to draft Giddey's replacement, unless that player, that position, or that kind of wing, it just happens to be there at that point. So I think it's just kind of based off of whoever is available, and you just try to get a guy who you have a lot of confidence in, can come in and contribute, and kind of go from there. Because I'm not sure that they would even tell you that they thought J-Dub was going to be as good as he was in year 2 when they picked him at that point. So
beautiful. Gentlemen, I think that's going to do us for tonight. If you guys do not already, you got 7 days to go watch all of the videos on Keandre's YouTube channel, Hoop Intellect. Keandre, I'm not going to make you tell us all the breakdowns you've done for the class so far, but can you share with us what's on deck coming in the next week before the draft happens?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming over the next several days, probably one every day. So those of new big board, Tristan Da Silva, like we mentioned earlier, that's coming up soon too. So yeah, that's the main thing that's coming on the channel.
Awesome. You guys make sure to go check out Keandre's YouTube channel. Follow him on Twitter as well at Hoop Intellect. He'll be tagged in our tweet of this show tonight. So you can just, if you already follow us, you can click that, follow Keandre. He is a great follow, not just for draft stuff, but just in general. Super smart basketball mind. Keandre, 3 years in a row. Cannot thank you enough. And we're going to make it 4 next year. So just be prepared. I think the Thunder have like 4 draft picks next year too. So you're going to have your work cut out for you. You're just going to have to be like a permanent fixture, because the 17 firsts coming up. We're going to need someone to talk to. You guys have a great rest of your week. We'll be back Sunday for some final draft thoughts before the draft gets here. And do not forget Wednesday night to join us during the draft for our draft live stream. David Skelton is literally giving us money just to say hello. That is absurd. Thank you, David. We appreciate that. We'll see you guys Sunday. Until then, and as always, Thunder up.